Alright, hear me out. Avatar is great at a lot of things, but romance? Not so much. Arguably the best love story in The Last Airbender is the cabbage merchant and his cabbages. My cabbages! A tragic love, no doubt, but one which has 43 stories on Archive of Our Own, the true measure of a ship's success, including Cabbage Merchant and Cedric Diggory. Katara and Aang, or Katang, only have 1,200 fanfics to Zutara's 4,000, and we have to ask if maybe, just maybe, it's because Katara and Aang was a bad idea? Critics of Katang say it's not that meaningful, it's one-sided, it's the hero gets the girl trope where the female protagonist is treated as a reward, especially if they're often comparing it to Zutara. Like, people look at Zuko and Katara and they see water and fire, red and blue. She's motherly and he has mummy issues. He understands her better because of the darkness inside him. All of the stuff which supposedly makes their love mean something, whereas Aang just pops out of the iceberg, sees his first woman in 100 years and goes, yeah, that's it, that's the one, happily ever after. I made a whole other video discussing Zutara and whether it's any good and what it really means and why people love it, which you should definitely go watch. It's a great video. But I think we both underestimate Katang, and two, I want to talk about shipping culture, this thing which like looms over every fandom and which I am kind of alien to but find fascinating. But to really understand this ship, we have to understand the people, Aang and Katara. So let's go. Part 1, Love at First Genocide. When we first meet Aang, he doesn't know it yet, but he is the last of his kind, the last airbender. Everyone he has ever known or loved is dead. And worse, he feels responsible for running away. More than that, the world Aang knew is dead. Not just the people, his friends, his family, but the way the world worked. It's now at war. People used to travel freely, trade, communicate, cultural exchange. It is, in many ways, a world with less joy in it. A deeply isolated world. The 4 nations he knew are no longer. The Northern Water Tribe has cut itself off to survive, not speaking to their sister tribe. The Earth Kingdom has decayed into authoritarianism under the weight of the war, and the Fire Nation, well, it attacked. As far as Aang knows, at the start, the dragons are extinct, the sky bison are extinct. When he goes to the Southern Air Temple, it's an eerily dead place. There's another element to this, which is really only explored in the comics, but Aang was only 12 when he left. Think about it. He might have been a master airbender, but he doesn't have an encyclopedic knowledge of his people's culture and history and ways. Much of Aang's own culture was permanently lost in the genocide, never to be passed down to him, irrecoverable, something Aang will never get back. We know most of their relics were taken or destroyed, and it's why Aang's decision to leave the sacred room in the Northern Air Temple unopened is so interesting. It's a desperate plea to preserve something of that past, even at the sacrifice of him losing access to it. Loss, grief, and loneliness are major themes in Aang's story, core to several of his most important story beats, and often set against Aang's optimism and level-headedness, a struggle to not give in to the rage and pain that stems from that loss and loneliness, a reasonable man pushed to his very extremes. We see this in the Southern Air Temple, we see it when he loses Appa, and part of the beauty of his climactic fight with Ozai is that Aang has every opportunity, every reason to give in to his rage, to kill the Fire Lord, every justification to take Ozai out.
You and your forefathers have devastated the balance of this world, and now you shall pay the ultimate price!
Of course, he learns he's not alone. Almost everything I just described can be equally applied to the love of his life. Hama, Katara, a girl whose people were wiped out, a genocide which left her the sole waterbender in the south, a character whose struggles are deeply tied to being cut off from her own culture as well, her own sense of identity. She has nobody to learn waterbending from. No way for her to pursue this side of herself. Worse, she's been told to keep it hidden, to suppress it her whole life. Not to mention, she partly blames herself for her mother's death, sacrificed to keep her alive. People often frame Katara stealing the waterbending scroll as just being about jealousy, that, Aang is picking up this waterbending thing faster than she did. But it's pretty clear in the episode how fascinated she is just to get a glimpse into her own culture, how much she craves the opportunity to participate in a life and a world taken from her. It's why being told she can't learn to fight hurts even more. She finally finds her people, and she's still cut off. And it's why meeting Hama, another Southern waterbender and the Puppet Master, is so significant to her.
Yes, of course. To learn about my heritage, it would mean everything to me.
The struggle is deepened in the comics when Katara returns home to find the South is growing and industrializing and getting better, and that sounds good, but it's also potentially losing its older cultural ways. ways precious to her that she felt like she was only just starting to get back. Their food, their architecture, their ways of living, their bending ways, a struggle we see Aang has to endure too. Katara and Aang both find themselves alone in the world, but they find themselves alone with each other, with the only other person who understands. It's why Katara is the only person who can bring Aang back from his rage at the Southern Air Temple, or when he loses Appa. It's not just that she's the heart of the group who attaches herself to anyone with a dead parent, but because she's the only one who, really gets it. Part 2. Aang is freedom. When people say Katang is one-sided, I kinda know what they're getting at. Katara is constantly there to support him and bring Aang back from the brink, but it's not so much the other way around, so I can see where this idea comes from, even if I don't really agree with it. This opinion is mostly rooted in one moment in Season 3, during the Southern Raiders, where we see that Katara is furious and traumatized and she wants to face her mother's killer. I get it. This is Katara's darkest moment, and Aang basically says, well, hey, I get it. You've got all this unbelievable pain and rage, directly compares it to him losing Appa and Gyatso, but then goes on to dish out some monk wisdom and tells her to forgive and move on. And let's be honest, he does do it in a slightly snarky way.
It's okay, because I forgive you. That give you any ideas?
It does sound a little bit insincere, so I can kind of see where this comes from, but it is only one moment. It feels dismissive. Katara does go on to confront Yon Ra, takes her anger out on him, even if she doesn't kill him or forgive him before returning to Aang. But I think this is probably more an example of cultural differences than Aang's lack of empathy for her. He is empathetic, but in the ways he was brought up. The difference is Aang is, for the most part, a master of his own emotions. That's what makes the Southern Air Temple and the Sandbenders moment so visceral. This is not the Aang we know. He is calm and level-headed under pressure. But Katara getting overly emotional and angry, well, let's just say that she's never been perfectly emotionally regulated.
Well, I can't be around you!
I think Aang's empathy comes across a bit practiced because, well, it is. From his perspective, he's concerned that revenge will destroy her from the inside. Katara's strong suit is comforting people and relating to them, but Aang is kind of an outsider, for better and sometimes worse. Not to say he handled this perfectly, it's kind of like when your partner offers you solutions instead of just listening to you when that's what you truly need. But also it's really important to note that people express support in different ways, and Katara's is definitely that empathy, caring, bringing someone back from the brink. It's not clear that that is necessarily Aang's. If you've been in a relationship, you'll know that you learn to express your love and care in different ways, which may or may not be more visible to other people. He helps her be her best self. He refuses to train with Paku if the waterbending master won't help Katara. Doesn't even hesitate. He cares about her passions and needs. He doesn't vilify her the way Sokka does when she steals the scroll. Because most of all, I think Aang represents a kind of freedom to Katara. Remember, Katara has grown up being told to hide her bending, to not pursue that part of herself, but from the moment Aang turns up, he pushes her to embrace it, praises her for it, helps her see herself differently through it. There's this interesting dynamic between them, and through her, Aang sees the need to take up his own responsibility again, to master his own bending powers. But there is a whole other side to this, which is really important, and I think a lot of people get caught up in, that Katara was forced to mature way faster than is ever fairer for a 14-year-old. She sacrificed her childhood to become a motherly figure to Sokka, forced to play the adult, the mother, the responsible one, while Sokka cosplayed as man of the house. And a little part of her resents this. It's what led to her outburst, which freed Aang from the iceberg, but it's also what led her to set her own needs and joys aside for others. She's clearly a motherly figure throughout the series, but that sense of responsibility leaves her being overly cautious, burdened, constantly worried about what might go wrong, something they mock her for in The Runaway because, they don't really understand where that comes from. But Aang? He's carefree, he's calm, he's level-headed, he's fun, he's go with the flow, able to find the joy in anything, opposite to her in so many ways. And so in a way, it's him who gives Katara the one thing she really needs and wants. He lets her be a kid again. In the very first episode, what's the first thing he asks her to do with him?
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
He helps her find joy and wonder in the little moments. He frees her from the burden of responsibility, which I think she needs just as much as he needs to take up responsibility. He pushes her to take risks. It's Aang who gets her to enter the Fire Nation ship. He pushes her to trust herself. In this sense, Aang and Katara really help each other, and like any good couple, each side has their strengths. A good relationship isn't just two people coexisting. You know where you need to help your partner and where they need to help you. Katara also clearly represents a kind of hope for Aang. After losing everyone and everything, she becomes this bright point in a dark world that makes everything seem worthwhile. In The Guru, as Aang goes through his chakras, they talk about how all that grief and pain and love for his people is reborn in the form of new love. In Katara, she represents opportunity for a new life in this world. And all of this only deepens when Pati tells him to let her go in order to master the Avatar state. Because at first, he refuses, he sees Katara is in danger, goes to help her, and it's only in seeing they're about to lose the battle in the catacombs that Aang finally decides to let go of his earthly attachments in order to gain control of the Avatar state. In other words, Aang chooses to save Katara by sacrificing his ability to be with her. This is Aang's love. This is Aang maturing. And it's also clear that it's at this moment that Katara really starts to see him as a man, until Azula zaps him. Part 3. Aang is a child. It's a little bit difficult to say Katang has all this depth when for half the show, Katara really sees him as a little brother, as a kid.
I made you a necklace, Katara. I thought since you lost your other one.
Katara has been forced to mature from a young age, whereas Aang clings to a carefree existence with little responsibility. The consequence of this is that Aang and Katara start at very different maturity levels psychologically, and a lot of their development can really only be put down to their changing friendship. Of course, any good relationship is also a friendship, but I think this is very different to, for example, Sokka and Suki, where their growing mutual respect for each other is very clearly romantic from the start, clearly happening on both sides at the same time. It's mutual, which is why every time Aang tries to flirt with her in the first season, it is awkward, it is embarrassing, and honestly, quite cringe. But all of this does also mean that for a lot of the series, it feels like Aang and Katara are on two very different emotional maturity journeys that maybe doesn't put them on the same level playing field. And I get why people might feel a little bit strange about, seeing characters like that get together. Because where Katara had to mature fast, Aang is clearly running away from responsibility at the start, even if he does mature later. It's only when Katara sees him as an adult that she even starts to really entertain the idea of him romantically. This first occurring in The Fortune Teller, where she's told she will marry a powerful bender and then sees Aang fighting a volcano. Which, by the way, I have always loved as a parallel to the other, most powerful expression of bending in the entire series when Roku fought a volcano. I thought that was great, foreshadowing, symmetry, all that sort of stuff. We do get a couple of other moments which hint at their relationship, like the Cave of Two Lovers. But it doesn't really kick off until season 3 with The Awakening, after Aang bolts off into the wilderness ashamed of his failure, and she goes, "It's not brave of him to do this, it's selfish and stupid. We could be helping him, and I know the world needs him, but he doesn't know how much we need him too. How can he just leave us behind?" She is obviously using we where she means I here. This is a typical romance trope where a character generalizes their very personal feelings. They clearly both mean a lot to each other. They see the other as a deeply important part of how they see themselves. This comes out pretty explicitly in The Headband when they dance together, and this is another example of Aang helping Katara let loose, live in the moment, forget caution, be a kid, and we get to see that Katara is attracted to his confidence. All of this culminates, of course, in the kiss in the invasion. They're both worried about how they're gonna die, but neither of them are particularly good at articulating their emotions. They're teenagers, we all get it. But up until this point, every time they have expressed romantic affection for each other, it's been symbolic and subtle, if anything. This is why another criticism people have of Katang is that Katara has no agency, that by the time of their first kiss, she has never once really, fully, unprompted, openly expressed her love for him. This is, of course, in part because Aang had feelings for Katara for a lot longer than she ever did for him. And I can see where this is coming from, because I think we'd all agree that really passionate love stories will thrive or die on those more proactive expressions of love from both sides. And maybe Katang would have been stronger with a more proactive kind of statement or action from Katara. It's not there's nothing, but more could have helped, right? I think this is partly why people view Katang as maybe weaker, especially because like Zuko and Katara's relationship is at least very dynamic. It's very back and forth, very proactive on both sides, wherever it ended up. And this brings us to... I was not meant to be sitting here. This was not meant to be happening. Right now, I was meant to be telling you about a sponsor, because a while ago, a pretty popular writing software reached out to me and said, hey, we want to sponsor some videos, which I thought was great because they're a great fit for the videos and a really important source of income for me. But then, after a while, it became clear to me that the writing software has features which are sort of pushing people to use AI to generate some of their text, to suggest rewrites and changes, to lean on that. It was only a small part of the product, but that sort of made me uncomfortable. So I reached out to them and I asked them how the AI was trained. I wanted to talk about that, what their plans were for it in the future. Some answers were good, some less good, but I still had my doubts. So I asked you guys, I put it to a poll, and the majority of you felt that this crossed a line. There are nuances as to where AI can fit into the creative process and the industry, but they aren't nuances I felt I could meaningfully and ethically explore while taking that amount of money from them. So I pulled the sponsor, and that was a significant financial hit for me, but it was a decision I felt I needed to make. Plus, I realized if you want educational writing tools anyway, then I have something far better to give you, my on-writing and world-building books, which take all of the educational writing and world-building discussions we've had and put them into these easier-to-read and reference books with far more detail and depth than I could ever fit on YouTube. You know, here on YouTube, I'm limited by the algorithm and thumbnails and video structure, and I've got none of that in here. They're just far better, and they've already sold about 100,000 copies already, which just astounds me every single time I say that, but each of these covers completely different topics, so you can pick which one suits you best, but I say gets all three. But if you're wanting fiction, instead, then you can get a catalog for the End of Humanity, which is packed full of sci-fi and fantasy stories, which are super meaningful to me and apparently really meaningful to the people who've read them as well. You know, thank you so much if you've read a review. There's stories about a girl who becomes a god. There's a family who lives with death. There's stories about the stars going out. And all of these are created completely without AI and purely with 100% human expression. Because I realized that I can't fully throw myself behind that writing software, but I can fully throw myself behind these. And it's pretty amazing that I get to, promote my video with my own stuff anyway. But if that's not enough, you know how it seems like the ending of Game of Thrones feels like it was written by AI? Well, I've got a video about that, sort of, about whether the ending to Game of Thrones is going to be the real ending in the books, or which parts of it are and which parts of it aren't, and which parts completely baffle me. You can go listen to that over on my Patreon right now. And there's also another video exclusive for patrons on Andor as well. All of these are a great way to support my work. So if you want to help me keep making videos, if you want you to be the sponsor of all of this, then I say pick one of these. If you want fiction, get a catalog for the End of Humanity. If you want to learn more, get my on-writing and world-building books. And if you want to hear me talk about Game of Thrones and Andor, then go join the Patreon and listen to those exclusives. Thank you so much. Back to the video. Part 4, The Ember Island Players. This is the controversial episode, the one rife with conspiracies and speculation, because Aang confronts Katara over their fledgling relationship, and Katara says, hey, look, I am confused right now. There is a war on. I cannot focus on a relationship. And of course, Aang tries to kiss her, assumedly thinking, hey, it worked last time. And she is rightfully angry. Now, a lot of Zutara shippers have construed this moment as secretly hinting at a love triangle between Katara, Aang, and Zuko, especially because just the episode before was the Southern Raiders, where her feelings for the dark and brooding firebender have supposedly been awakened, and she finally sees that he understands her better than Aang can, especially because Aang asks how she feels about him, and she doesn't even say, hey, I want to be with you, we just have to focus on this right now. She says she's confused. This isn't really what's happening, but it's open enough to interpretation that it lets anyone who wants to conspiratorialize and theorize and imagine what could have possibly have happened. Especially when you've got these two episodes which are romantically significant for Katara. Even so, this is really the only significant point of tension for kind of like Katang, for Katara and Aang here. Everything else before this hasn't really been like conflict, just pining. But Aang and Katara do make up, and it basically all comes together in the end, in the final episode, where Katara initiates the kiss. The rest is history. Saying it's a hero gets the girl trope here I think is very wrong, and I think it really dismisses and diminishes Katara's character, especially considering Katara has her whole own story, her own climactic battle of which she is the victor, which, if you really wanted, could be reframed as her getting Aang. Part 5. Does Katang work? Honestly, I think that a lot of the reason that people maybe feel Katang is less real than other ships is that fundamentally it's a pretty vanilla love story. There's not a huge amount of conflict in it. You've got two characters realizing they like each other, one before the other, one slight moment of tension, and then them getting together happily ever after. And that's fine, but it's not necessarily dramatically exciting. In contrast, Zutara is full of conflict and intrigue. Every scene is packed full of emotion, and maybe this means that their eventual falling in love is more meaningful. Not just something that happens, but it explodes onto the scene. Sokka's love stories are full of tragedy, of push and pull and change and constant back and forth. There's not really any major conflict between Katara and Aang. It's much more a conflict between them and the world. And a lot of the depth to their relationship exists as friendship before Katara realizes she even has feelings for him. It's not exactly romantically coded in the same way a lot of other ships are. Others argue Aang's love is maybe a bit hollow because he basically just had a crush from the first moment and ran with it, unlike, say, Sokka, whose love grew out of respect for Suki, or Zutara, where their mutual traumas were the starting bonding point of their love. But the truth is, of course, a lot of healthy relationships do just start out as a crush on a friend, someone that you see at the mall and you make a move. It's realizing you're into your best friend. That's what happened with me and my wife. We spoke every night and then started to see each other differently. It just happens. Katang is also a relationship which isn't particularly sexual. Not that it should be for a kids show, but we see how Sokka and Suki have these intensely flirtatious moments between them. There's even subtext implying they got laid. Zuko has a bit of this too in his story. I mean, let's be honest, the art for Zutara belongs on the front of a modern romantasy book, but Katang, not so much. Katang isn't impeded a lot by conventional romance tropes like misunderstandings, miscommunications, breakups, divisions in their families. No, it's, broadly speaking, a relationship about good people who understand and support each other from the start and work through any issues that come up. But none of this makes it a bad ship. It's just a ship on calm seas. Which is why it was so fascinating for me to look into the shipping community and see how people talked about Katang, to see how they portrayed their love. If you look at the Katang fan art, you'll immediately notice this intensely positive, bubbly vibe between them. Aang is his wife's #1 champion, she is his greatest support. Their love is soft and comforting, like slipping into a warm bed. It's a good love, a healthy love. Zutara, on the other hand, is different. Yes, we see their love being healthy too, but it's marked by themes of passion rooted in their history of conflict. It's portrayed as a very physical, touchy love. The characters more often portrayed as enwrapped in each other in more adult clothing, an emphasis on their bodies fitting together just as much as their spirits. It's still a deeply real love in the shipping community, but these are different kinds of love, which I think appeal to different people and different desires. I mean, I came across one Zutara piece where Zuko is a vampire feeding on Katara, playing into those darker themes of risk and danger and electrifying love. This just wouldn't happen with Aang. You know how people talk about the different words for love? You know, like eros, passionate and physical, philia, deep friendship, agape, which is unconditional, sacrificial, spiritual love, ludus, which is light-hearted, flirtatious love, pragma, a mature and enduring love. You can see which kinds of love Katang and Zutara art and discussions lean towards. It's not hard, but they're both meaningful. I think part of it is how Aang is not a conventional romance hero. He's shorter than Katara, he's pacifist, unaggressive, open emotionally, less traditionally masculine, and potentially, some people didn't see themselves as much in him. So maybe when they saw these moments, they didn't come across as strongly romantically coded compared to some of the other characters we might have identified with. And of course, there are other clunky writing issues with Katang. Like, we're told that Aang needs to choose between his destiny, between the Avatar state and Katara, and of course in the end he doesn't really have to. There are, lore reasons that they can get around this, but it does feel a little weaker. Of course, this sort of thing isn't really about how meaningful Katang's love is, but it does, I think, muddy the journey a little. The truth is, I was never much of a shipper. Not for Katang, not for Zutara, not for Korosami. It's just not something that I'm particularly invested in the series. I know a lot of other people are, and I think that's great. Just for me as a kid, it just wasn't the thing that I was super interested in. I don't think Katang is like a bad love story or anything like that. I think that for the most part it is okay, that it's fine. Is it any less meaningful than Zutara might have been? I suppose if you tally up all the symmetry and symbolism each ship has to decide, like, maybe? But that's a really weird way to decide which is the most meaningful thing you can write. Here's the thing, all of that symbolism and meaning is still there in the depth of that friendship. Romantic love isn't necessarily the most authentic expression of a story's themes, and that's okay. But I want to know what you think. Are you a Katang fan or a Zutara fan? And do go watch the other video because it's really kind of the other half to this discussion. They really feed into each other. In fact, they were one script before it got too long and I kind of had to split them up. Stay nerdy. Tell me your favorite ship down below and I will see you in the future. And make sure you check out my Zutara video back then.
This is Hampy. Why hello there, welcome to the secret ending to the Katang video. Now if you watched the Zutara video you may know that there was a secret ending to that as well. I spent a while talking about like the importance of human expression and how valuable that is to me and human art, and so I kind of want to speak to that a little bit more by showing you some of the amazing Katang art which I encountered in the research for this video, because there was so much but I didn't feel like I could just put it in the video, you know, so I'm going to show you now. If you want to stay, great, because it's awesome. All of these artists are linked down in the description below. Many of them are open for commission if you want to hire them. I think they're amazing. I would love to work with some of them. The first one of which is Nialtia the End, linked down below, which is this just absolutely stunning mosaic piece of Katara and Aang. I love this so much. I think it is incredible. The colors just stand out so much. The style is just absolutely wonderful. I think it is incredible, and I had to share it with you. The second piece is by Izzy Art on Tumblr. Now, this piece is interesting because it does speak to a theme in a lot of Katang art, which is family. Both, you know, Aang and Katara lost kind of a lot of their people, right? They're both like victims of a genocide. So a lot of the art projects into the future and sees them with a new family of their own, the birth of the new generation of airbenders, of new waterbenders, southern waterbenders. And I really, really liked that. I love the maturity in a lot of the Katang art. I think that's fantastic. Like, for example, here's another one by Izzy Art featuring Aang and Katara in their old age. You know, again, I spoke in the Zutara video about how like the art of Zutara is very it's very passionate, it's often very physical. The love in the art of Katang is very comforting, it's very safe, it's very family oriented, it's very dedicated, it's about loyalty, it's about you know, the surety of a deep love. Another example of this is that this piece by RNColo 78300 over on Twitter. This shows like the eyes of Aang and Katara, and that's it. And I wanted to show you this piece because a lot of the art in Katang isn't like kissing necessarily. There is that. They do have physical, you know, expressions of love in Katang art, but a lot of it is instead just very subtle. That's the thing. A lot of it is depicted as a lot closer to friendship, and there's a lot of this sort of just intense emotions inside their eyes of care, and I felt like this sort of came out in these eyes, this sort of just this beautiful light and warmth to them. You know, it's just such a lovely little expression of what they see in each other. The eyes being like the important way that they engage with each other rather than the lips or the hands, which is a lot more common in Zutara art. The last piece is by Valinxi over on Twitter, and this is a little bit of that sort of like yin-yang that we see in Zutara, but in their own way. Blue and orange are another kind of like opposite colors which often work together. And we've also got these parallels between airbending and waterbending. You know, they're both got that sort of swishy cloudiness to them. I really love that. I also just love Valinxi's art overall, just fantastic artist, completely brilliant. Go follow them. I love the sense of power in some of the Katang art as well. A lot of it is very subtle and family oriented and all of that, but sometimes you do get these displays of like power, but it's like a beautiful kind of power rather than the intensity and conflict that you often see between fire and water with Zutara. There are so many other pieces I wish I could show you, but those are just a handful, linked all down below. There you go, there's your secret ending. Go check out, you know, human artists, and if you're keen, check out me, because I am a human artist in my own right. I'm an author. I've got more pieces coming out and secret things happening. I'll see you guys in the future. Oh, and tell me about your favorite part of Katang or Zutara art down below.